And it is time for our insiders to talk politics here on News 19. Our Democratic strategist tonight, Antoine Seawright. Our Republican strategist is Joel Sawyer. Guys, again, thank you so very much for your time. Let's dive right into the race for president. South Carolina having their primaries coming up in February. Antoine, right now, what's your assessment of the presidential race in South Carolina?
Well, as I've said during the Democratic nominating process, I think everyone understands that the road to heaven and the White House runs through South Carolina, and whoever wins South Carolina on the Republican side will likely have full, I think, throttle towards being the party's nominee today. And I think probably in days to come, that person is former President Donald Trump. Regardless of what happens on the legal front with the former president, he still has a base of supporters, somewhere between 37 to 43% of folks who will vote for him no matter what. And I think that will still remain in South Carolina in spite of two South Carolinians being in the race.
This doesn't happen every day, but I'm forced to mostly agree with Antoine. Look, I think that right now that Donald Trump is in the driver's seat, it's probably his race to lose unless one of these other candidates has a moment and starts gathering momentum at the right time. I suspect Donald Trump's floor is probably a little lower than what Antoine says. 37 to 43%. I would probably tend on the lower side of that. But we also do know that his ceiling is probably around 65% of the Republican primary electorate. Obviously, two South Carolinians in the race, but they're in kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario where if you win your home state, it's like, well, you're supposed to win your home state. But if you don't win your home state, it's like, wow, you can't even win your home state. So a lot of time left for this to play out, but I have to agree with Antoine that Trump is in the driver's seat as of this moment.
But what I will say about South Carolina in the Republican nominating process versus South Carolina in the Democratic nominating process is that on the Democratic side, it's like horse betting. It's win, place, or show. On the Republican side, it's winner take all. So if the former president runs the table before South Carolina and starts to have momentum coming into South Carolina, it would not shock me if the two South Carolina candidates would even remain to go on in the race. And I would also say, and Joe, you may or may not agree with me, but just because you are running for the nomination does not mean you're running to be the nominee. In some cases, some in the race are running to be relevant. Some are running for potential cabinet spots. Others are running to be on the ticket. And others are running perhaps to be in the conversation 4 years from now. And I think we have to always consider those things when we're thinking about a Republican primary that has been dominated by Trumpism, even though they're trying to run away from the former president.
Joel, do you see a scenario here where it won't be Trump and it won't be Biden running against each other November of next year? In other words, could it be a totally different ticket there, somebody new on the Republican side and somebody new on the Democrat side?
I don't see anybody other than President Biden being on the Democratic ticket, due to electoral purposes. If there's some, kind of unforeseen health issue that comes up, that would be the only thing to take him off the ticket. On the Republican side, look, it's still Donald Trump's to lose. Everyone else is, with the exception of DeSantis, is polling in the low single digits. DeSantis' campaign has had their share of troubles lately in terms of staffers lost. I'm being diplomatic, Antoine. In terms of staffers lost, concern about in the political sphere what we call burn rate, which is how much you're spending versus how much you're taking in. Very high burn rate with the DeSantis campaign and associated super PACs. A lot of folks, in the donor class, if you want to call it that, are kind of leaving DeSantis for dead right now. Now, that being said, we all remember John McCain back in 2008. People wanted to leave him for dead about this time too, and he came roaring back to win the nomination. So, the bottom line is that for us insiders who are watching this stuff every day, there's a lot of little twists and turns. But for the vast majority of people who are actually going to go out and vote, decide this race, there's an eternity left in terms of time.
Joel, the former president coming to South Carolina for the third time this year on Saturday night. What are Republicans hoping to hear from the former president other than defending himself from the allegations that are against him?
Look, his stump speech, if you want to call it that, is largely the same everywhere you go. It's lofty promises and airing of grievances. So I think we'll hear a lot of both of those things when he comes to South Carolina.
Well, and I would say, look, this will be the first time I think in a platform way that the former president will speak to the Republican base fresh off of another indictment. This is the third, and likely will be a fourth at some point. So look for Donald Trump to be at home in his comfort zone on the campaign trail, speaking to a group of people he knows that are unmovable no matter what happens. But also look for him to continue to have a personality conversation and not have a policy conversation. And while the other candidates in the race are really trying their best to force a policy conversation, that's not what Trumpism is about. That's not what got him to the presidency or to the Republican nomination the first time around. So he's going to continue to try to have a personality conversation with the understanding of knowing that elections are about coalitions and constituencies. And those two things he has on lock within the Republican base. And no matter what happens in the Republican nominating process, if it's not Trump, whoever is the nominee or whoever is the healthiest alternative will have to embrace Trumpism if they want to have a chance of trying to compete with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and try to galvanize and pull away independent voters who today are breaking towards my party, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democratic Party.
All right, Antoine C. Wright, our Democrat strategist, Joel Sawyer, our Republican strategist. Guys, thank you so very much for your time. Of course, there's still a long ways to go before the primaries in February of next year. We've got you covered on our website tonight. Everything you need to know, WLTX.com.